a senior product manager at Amazon, and on March 12, 2025 at 11:17 a.m., he was laid off. The notification was a sterile calendar invite from an HR partner he'd never met. The meeting lasted 7 minutes. His manager, a man named Todd, with whom he'd shared countless coffees and project plans, couldn't quite meet his eyes through the Chime video call. The severance was standard: 16 weeks pay, a small bonus proration, and a year of Cobra health insurance. It was a clean corporate amputation. As he clicked Leave Meeting, the silence in his Belltown apartment, which cost them a staggering $4,300 a month in rent, felt heavier than ever before. He looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the Seattle drizzle coating the glass towers of the city, each one a monument to a world that had just ejected him. He felt a strange numbness, a sense of falling without acceleration. He spent the next hour performing the digital funeral rites of a modern tech worker. He transferred personal files from his company laptop to a $120 Samsung solid-state drive. He downloaded his contacts. He wrote a brief, professional farewell note to his team on Slack, a message that was met with a flurry of sad face emojis and private messages of support that felt both genuine and hollow. One message from a junior engineer named David stood out. "This is a huge mistake on their part, man. You're the sharpest PM I've ever worked with. Whatever you do next, it's going to be big." Nikolai appreciated the sentiment, but big felt like a concept from another lifetime. Right now his world had shrunk to the four walls of his two-bedroom apartment. He decided to call his wife Marisol. He wanted to hear her voice, to tell her they'd be okay, that this was just a setback. He dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. That was unusual. She always answered. He tried again. Voicemail. A small, cold knot began to form in his stomach. He sent a text. "Hey, got some news? Call me when you can." He walked into their master bedroom, planning to change out of his work-from-home uniform of a $60 Lululemon shirt and joggers. He stopped dead in the doorway. The closet was open. Her side, usually a meticulously organized collection of high-end brands, was half empty. The hangers, once burdened by $2,400 Burberry dresses and $200 Stella McCartney blouses, were now bare metal skeletons. On the bed, two large black Samsonite suitcases, the $700 set they'd bought for their honeymoon in Italy, were open and filled with her belongings. Marisol stood by the dresser, her back to him, carefully folding a silk scarf. She didn't seem surprised to see him. She didn't even flinch. She simply placed the scarf in the suitcase and clicked the latch shut. The sound echoed in the silent room. "What are you doing?" Nikolai's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Marisol turned, her expression unreadable. She was wearing a sleek, $8,700 Armani suit, the one she wore to her job as a wealth management associate. Her luminous, deep brown skin was flawless, her makeup perfect. She looked like she was heading to a board meeting, not dismantling their life. "I'm packing," she said, her tone as neutral as if she were discussing the weather. "My mother is expecting me in Tacoma." The cold knot in his stomach tightened into a fist of ice. "Tacoma? What's going on, Mari? Did something happen?" She picked up her $8,000 Chanel handbag from the bed, the one he'd bought her for their 3rd anniversary. "I heard about the layoffs this morning," she said, avoiding his eyes. "My friend in recruiting sent me a list. I saw your name." She finally looked at him, and her gaze was devoid of sympathy. It was analytical, calculating. "I'm sorry about your job, Nikolai. Truly. But I can't be a part of this." "A part of what?" he asked, his mind struggling to process the monumental disconnect between his reality and hers. "It's a layoff. It happens. We have savings. I'll find something else." She gave a small, humorless laugh. It was a sound he had never heard from her before, and it chilled him to the bone. You don't get it. This isn't just a layoff, it's a signal. The market is turning. Your severance will barely cover 6 months of our expenses. And then what? We burn through the savings while you find something? She gestured around the expensive apartment. This life has a cost. I'm not willing to downgrade. She walked past him toward the door, pulling the 2 large suitcases behind her. The little wheels made a soft, whirring sound on the hardwood floor, a sound he knew would haunt his dreams. At the door, she paused and delivered the final, devastating blow. She looked back at him, her face a mask of detached pragmatism. Frankly, she said, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur, it's safer to be gone before tax season. Have you ever had a moment where the world you knew was completely shattered by someone you trusted? It's a pain that goes beyond simple heartbreak. Let us know in the comments if you've ever faced a betrayal that forced you to rebuild from scratch. Their life together had been a carefully constructed facade of success, and Nikolai, blinded by love, had never thought to look too closely at the invoices. He remembered the day they moved into the Belltown apartment. Marisol had insisted on it. It's an investment in our image, Nikolai, she'd argued, standing in the empty living room as the light from the setting sun glinted off the Puget Sound. We need to live where our network lives. He had wanted a smaller place, maybe in Ballard, something more affordable that would allow them to save aggressively. His salary was high, but so was their burn rate. He wore an $89 Timex watch and drove a 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it. He preferred to invest his money, not wear it. Marisol was the opposite. Her net worth was worn on her body. He thought of the dinners at Canlis, where the bill regularly crested $800. He had always seen them as special occasions. She saw them as networking necessities. He remembered her 30th birthday party, a catered event at the apartment that cost over $15,000. She'd curated the guest list with surgical precision, a mix of her clients, his senior colleagues from Amazon, and a handful of venture capitalists she'd met at industry events. These people are our future, she'd whispered to him that night, her hand cool on his arm as she surveyed the room. You have to spend money to make money. At the time, her ambition had seemed exciting, a thrilling counterpoint to his own quiet, heads-down focus on building products. Now, in the crushing silence of the apartment, he saw it for what it was, a relentless, transactional climb. Every piece of their shared life had a price tag, and she was the one who had set the prices. The $6,000 Restoration Hardware Cloud sofa, the $4,000 Peloton bike that was used more as a clothes rack than for exercise, the bi-weekly cleaning service that cost $450 a month. He had paid for all of it, funneling his substantial income into a lifestyle she designed. Their joint savings account, which he thought was their safety net for the future, a down payment on a house, maybe a fund to start a family, was in her eyes just a liquidity pool to maintain their current standard of living. He had been a willing participant, a happy provider. He loved her, and he thought this was what love looked like, providing a beautiful life for the woman he had promised to cherish. He had made a critical mistake. He had confused her love for the lifestyle with her love for him. He remembered a conversation they'd had about 6 months prior. He was in the spare bedroom, which he used as his office, sketching out the architecture for an AI-powered trading algorithm. It was a side project, a passion he'd been nursing for over 18 months. He called it Aura Trade. It was his escape, a complex world of code and data where he was in complete control. Marisol had walked in, holding 2 glasses of a $150 bottle of Cabernet. She looked at the whiteboard covered in complex formulas and flowcharts. "What is all this, baby?" she asked, her voice laced with a gentle condescension. "Still tinkering with your little project?" "It's more than a project," he'd said, his excitement overriding his usual reserve. "I think this could be something real, Mari. The back-testing results are incredible. It's consistently outperforming the market by a significant margin." She had sipped her wine, her eyes glazing over. "That's nice, honey. Just don't let it distract you from your real job. That Amazon stock is what's going to buy us a house in Madison Park." She had kissed his forehead and left, leaving him alone with his whiteboard and the dawning, uncomfortable realization that she didn't see him. She saw his total compensation package. She didn't see his mind or his passion. She saw his ability to fund her ambitions. The memory was sour now, tainted by the finality of her exit. She hadn't just packed her bags. She had liquidated her investment in him. He was no longer a high-performing asset. He had become a liability. And Marisol, the pragmatic wealth manager, always cut her losses. Her words, "safer to be gone before tax season," hung in the air long after the sound of her suitcase wheels faded down the hallway. It was a statement of such profound, calculated cruelty that it left him breathless. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a risk assessment. She had weighed the pros and cons of staying with her unemployed husband and had decided he was a bad bet. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from his chest to his face. He stood motionless in the living room for what felt like an hour, staring at the door she had closed behind her. The apartment, once a symbol of their shared success, now felt like a gilded cage he could no longer afford. He walked back into the bedroom. The empty space in the closet was a wound. He could still smell her perfume, a $450 bottle of Baccarat Rouge 540, lingering in the air. He sat on the edge of the bed, on his side, and pulled out his phone. He opened their joint banking app, the one for the account where they had meticulously saved $185,432.17. He had a sick feeling in his gut, a premonition of what he was about to see. The screen loaded. The balance read $0. He scrolled down through the recent transactions. There was only one, a wire transfer for the full amount, initiated at 9:30 a.m. that morning, to an account he didn't recognize. The transfer had been authorized from her phone. She had emptied their entire life savings hours before he was even laid off. Her friend in recruiting hadn't just given her a heads up. She had given Marisol a head start. The numbness that had insulated him since the layoff call evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't a panicked decision. This was a premeditated extraction of assets. She had seen the iceberg coming and had not only secured her own lifeboat, but had also taken all the supplies with her. He felt a surge of anger so pure and white-hot it almost made him dizzy. It was followed by a wave of grief so profound he had to brace himself against the nightstand. The woman he had loved, the woman he had built a life with, had not only abandoned him at his lowest moment, she had robbed him on her way out. He thought about calling her, about screaming, demanding an explanation. But what was the point? Her actions were the only explanation he needed. Her logic was brutally simple. He was no longer useful. He looked at his phone again. A single text message from her had arrived while he was staring at the bank account. It read, "I've transferred my half of the savings. My lawyer will be in touch about the rest. I wish you the best, Nikolai." My half. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. She had contributed less than 10% of the money in that account. Her salary as a wealth management associate was respectable, around $120,000, but most of it went to her wardrobe, her car, a white BMW 3 Series that cost $43,000, and what she called maintaining her brand. He was the saver. He was the one who had diligently moved a portion of his paycheck and his annual stock vest into that account, month after month, year after year. It wasn't her half. It was their future, and she had stolen it. The phrase, "my lawyer will be in touch," was the final insult. It was a clear signal that this was now a formal, adversarial proceeding. There would be no tearful phone calls, no attempts at reconciliation. She had already moved on to the next phase, legal separation and the division of assets. Or rather, the division of his remaining assets. He felt a profound sense of foolishness. He, the man who designed complex systems and anticipated user behavior for a living, had failed to see the most obvious pattern in his own life. He had been played. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the rain-slicked streets of Belltown. The city looked alien to him now, hostile. He was alone, unemployed, and his savings were gone. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of the despair. It was crushing, a physical pressure on his chest. He felt like he was at the bottom of a deep, dark well, with no hope of climbing out. But then, another feeling began to surface, pushing through the grief and the anger. It was a cold, quiet resolve. She thought she had left him with nothing. She was wrong. She had taken the money, the furniture, the life they had built, but she had left him with his mind, and she had left him with Oratrade. In her final cruel calculation, she had made a critical error. She had underestimated him. It was an oversight that would cost her everything. The first discovery was the empty closet. The second was the drained bank account. The third, and perhaps most chilling, was the complete and utter silence that followed. In the digital age, it is almost impossible to truly disappear from someone's life without a trace. Yet Marisol managed it with terrifying efficiency. Her phone went straight to voicemail. His text remained unread. Single gray check marks on WhatsApp. He found that she had blocked him on every social media platform. Her Instagram, once a curated feed of their luxurious life, was now an inaccessible ghost. Her Facebook profile, which he rarely looked at, was also gone from his view. It was as if she had digitally erased their entire 8-year relationship in a matter of hours. He spent the first night in the cavernous, silent apartment. At 6:47 p.m., he ordered a $22 pizza from Domino's, the kind of cheap, greasy food they hadn't eaten in years. He ate 2 slices standing over the kitchen counter, the cold, imported marble feeling absurdly out of place. He looked at her side of the bed, the indentation from her body still faintly visible on the $400 Egyptian cotton sheets. He felt a pang of loss, so sharp it was like a physical blow. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the shared memories, the private jokes, the quiet intimacy of a long-term relationship. Had it all been a lie? Had he been sleeping next to a stranger for all these years? A woman who was simply waiting for a better offer or a market downturn? The next morning, the sun broke through the Seattle clouds, casting long shadows across the living room floor. The light illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, making the emptiness of the space even more apparent. He found a legal pad and a pen and sat down at the $3,000 oak dining table. He needed a plan. Panicking was not an option. Grieving had to be scheduled for later. Right now he needed to move with the same cold, methodical precision she had. He drew a line down the middle of the page. On one side, he wrote problems. On the other, solutions. The problems column was long and daunting. 1, unemployed. 2, savings, $185K, gone. 3, high rent, $4,300 MIU, on a 12-month lease with 8 months remaining. 4, impending divorce. 5, emotional devastation. He stared at the list. It was a portrait of a life in freefall. For a moment, the despair threatened to overwhelm him again. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and focused on the image of Marisol's face as she said, "Safer to be gone before tax season." He let the anger burn away the fear. He picked up the pen and moved to the solutions column. 1, unemployed. Launch Oratrade. Now. Not in 6 months. Not when the market is better. Now. He had the code. He had the back-testing data. He had a short list of angel investors, former colleagues who had become successful founders themselves, who had expressed interest in his little project in the past. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot he had. 2. Savings gone. He couldn't get the $185,000 back easily. A legal battle would be protracted and expensive. He had to consider it a sunk cost, a painfully expensive lesson in trust. He had to operate on the assumption that he was starting from zero. 3. High rent. He would break the lease. The penalty would be 2 months' rent, a painful $8,600 hit. But it was better than bleeding out another $3,400 over the next 8 months. He would find a cheap, small studio apartment, maybe in a less fashionable neighborhood like Greenwood or Capitol Hill. 4. Impending divorce. He would not contest it. He would not fight for anything. She could have the furniture, the art, the Peloton. He wanted nothing that reminded him of her. He would hire the most efficient, ruthless divorce attorney he could find and instruct them to make it as quick and clean as possible. 5. Emotional devastation. This was the hardest one. There was no simple solution. He wrote down a single word: focus. He would channel every ounce of his pain, his anger, and his humiliation into his work. Oratrade would be his therapy, his revenge, and his salvation. He would build. The sensory details of those first few days were seared into his memory. The smell of stale coffee in the empty apartment, the feeling of the cold leather of his Timbuktu messenger bag, now carrying the entire future of his company on a single laptop, the sound of the rain against the window, a constant reminder of the city's gloomy indifference. He discovered the small, cruel ways she had scrubbed him from her life. She had removed him as an authorized user on her credit cards. She had even changed the password to their shared Netflix account. Each discovery was a small twist of the knife, a reminder of her thoroughness. She hadn't just left. She had systematically dismantled every connection, every shared piece of their digital and financial lives. It was a masterclass in risk mitigation. For the next few weeks, Nikolai operated like a man possessed. He played dumb to the outside world, presenting a facade of calm consideration. When concerned friends or former colleagues called to check on him, he gave them a well-rehearsed, neutral script. "Yeah, it was a shock, but I'm taking some time to figure out what's next," he'd say, his voice even. "Marisol and I decided to separate. It's amicable. Just one of those things." Each lie was a small scene, a performance designed to keep the world at bay, while he worked furiously behind the curtain. He knew that any hint of his desperation or his true emotional state would be a liability. Investors don't back desperate founders. They back visionaries who are in control. So, he projected control, even as his internal world was a maelstrom of grief and fury. His first call was to David Chen, the junior engineer who had sent him the supportive message. David was brilliant, a recent University of Washington computer science graduate with an intuitive grasp of machine learning. "I'm starting something," Nikolai said, cutting straight to the point. "An AI trading platform. I need a co-founder. There's no salary yet, just equity. It's a massive risk." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then David said, "I'm in. I'll give my 2 weeks' notice tomorrow." That simple, unwavering belief was the first brick in his new foundation. His next calls were to his list of angel investors. He secured meetings with 3 of them. He spent 48 hours straight refining his pitch deck, fueled by caffeine and the burning memory of Marisol's betrayal. He didn't tell them he was broke. He didn't tell them his wife had left him and stolen his savings. He presented himself as a seasoned product leader who had identified a massive market opportunity and had chosen to leave a comfortable corporate job to pursue it. He walked them through the architecture of Oratrade, the proprietary algorithms, and the stunning backtesting results that showed a 40% annualized return over a 5-year period, dwarfing the S&P 500's average. He was calm, precise, and devastatingly competent. One of the investors, a sharp woman named Sarah who had sold her own fintech startup for 9 figures, grilled him on his personal financial situation. "How much of your own capital are you putting into this, Nikolai?" she asked, her eyes sharp. It was a critical moment. A lie here would be easily discovered during due diligence. He had to tell a version of the truth that sounded strategic, not desperate. "I'm liquidating my stock portfolio to fund our initial runway," he said, which was technically true. He was selling his remaining Amazon shares, a modest sum of about $50,000 after taxes. "But I'm looking for partners who can help us scale faster than I could alone." He framed his lack of capital as a strategic choice for speed, not a personal catastrophe. It was a masterful performance. By the end of the week, he had secured a seed round of $500,000 in exchange for 20% of the company, valuing his fledgling, 2-person startup at $2.5 million. The money hit his newly created business bank account on a Friday afternoon. He stared at the balance on his phone screen. $500,000 sellers. It was more than twice what Marisol had taken. It wasn't just capital, it was validation. It was oxygen. He broke the lease on the Belltown apartment the same day, writing a check for the $8,600 penalty without flinching. He hired a moving company for $600 to take the few things he wanted, his books, his computer equipment, his clothes, and put them in storage. He told the building manager that his ex-wife would be arranging to have the rest of the furniture removed. He didn't care what she did with it. That weekend, he moved into a tiny, $1,400 a month studio apartment in Capitol Hill. It was a single room with a small kitchen and a bathroom. After the sprawling luxury of the Belltown condo, it felt like a monk's cell. And it was perfect. There were no ghosts here. There were no memories of a life that had turned out to be a lie. There was only a mattress on the floor, a folding table for his computer, and the whiteboard he had salvaged, covered in the equations that would build his new empire. He was free. What do you think is the most important quality for someone starting over after a major setback? Is it resilience, focus, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The legal side of his life required a different kind of strategic planning. He found a divorce attorney named Marcus Thorne through a referral. Thorne's office was in a sleek glass tower on 2nd Avenue, and he billed at a rate of $1,200 per hour. He was known for being brutally efficient and emotionally detached. He was exactly what Nikolai needed. Nikolai sat across from Thorne in a minimalist office with a panoramic view of Elliott Bay. He laid out the facts of his separation with the same dispassionate clarity he had used in his investor pitches. He told him about the layoff, Marisol's immediate departure, and the $185,000 she had transferred from their joint account. Thorne, a tall, impeccably dressed black man in his 50s, listened without interruption, his fingers steepled. When Nikolai finished, he nodded slowly. "This is a classic flight risk scenario," Thorne said, his voice a calm baritone. "She saw a perceived depreciation in your value and liquidated her position. It's ugly, but not uncommon." "Can I get the money back?" Nikolai asked. "Can you? Yes. Should you?" "That's a different question," Thorne replied. "Washington is a community property state. Any assets acquired during the marriage are considered joint assets. However, she transferred the funds pre-separation without your consent. We can file a motion to have the funds frozen and return to a neutral account pending the divorce settlement. But it will be a fight, it will be expensive, and it will be emotionally draining. Her lawyer will argue that she was simply securing her half of the marital assets in anticipation of a divorce. They will drag it out." Nikolai thought for a moment. A long, drawn-out legal battle was a distraction he couldn't afford. His focus needed to be singular, or a trade. Every ounce of his energy, every dollar of his new company's capital, had to go toward building the business. Fighting Marisol over the stolen money felt like looking in the rearview mirror. "Let it go," Nikolai said, the decision solidifying as he spoke the words. "I don't want the money. I don't want the furniture. I don't want anything. I want the fastest, cleanest divorce possible. Give her whatever she wants. My only condition is a clean break. No alimony, no future claims on my income or assets." Thorne raised an eyebrow. "You're planning on a significant change in your financial situation?" It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "Yes," Nikolai said, "and I want the paperwork to reflect that this is the final settlement, with no possibility of future amendments based on changed circumstances." Thorne smiled, a thin, appreciative smile. "You're trading the past for the future. A wise investment." He made a note on a legal pad. "I'll draft the initial petition. We'll present it as a generous offer to expedite the process. We'll cede the savings and all physical assets in exchange for a full waiver of any future spousal support or claims. Her lawyer will likely advise her to take the deal. It gives her a clear, immediate win." They spent another hour going over the details of incorporating Oratrade, setting up the equity structure for him and David, and drafting the seed funding agreements. Nikolai wrote Thorne a retainer check for $25,000 from his new business account. As he left the office and stepped out into the crisp Seattle air, he felt a sense of profound lightness. He had made a strategic decision to amputate the past. It was a painful loss, but it would allow him to move forward, unencumbered. The $185,000 was the price of his freedom, and compared to the future he was about to build, it was a bargain. The next 6 months were a blur of relentless work. Nikolai and David rented a small, cheap office space in a WeWork in South Lake Union for $800 a month. Their days started at 6 a.m. and ended well after midnight. They lived on cheap takeout, protein bars, and a seemingly endless supply of coffee. The tiny Capitol Hill studio was just a place for Nikolai to sleep for 4 or 5 hours before starting all over again. He lost weight. He grew a beard. He didn't see friends. He didn't date. He worked. Oratrade was his entire world. He was the architect, the strategist, and the CEO. David was the brilliant builder, turning Nikolai's complex algorithmic theories into clean, efficient code. They landed their first beta clients in May, a handful of small family offices and high-net-worth individuals from Sarah's network. The platform performed flawlessly. The AI, which analyzed millions of data points in real time, made trading decisions with a speed and accuracy that was almost supernatural. The returns were immediate and impressive. Word began to spread through the tight-knit world of fintech. By July, they had a waiting list of over 50 potential clients. They hired 2 more engineers and a customer support specialist. The $500,000 seed money was being burned through at a controlled, efficient rate. Nikolai was a master of lean operations. Every dollar was scrutinized. There were no frivolous expenses, no fancy office perks. The money went into talent and technology, nothing else. In late August, Nikolai received an email that made his heart stop. The subject line was, "Intro, Oratrade, Andreessen Horowitz." Sarah, his lead seed investor, had made an introduction to one of the most powerful and respected venture capital firms in the world. A partner named Michael Chen wanted to meet. The meeting took place 2 weeks later. Nikolai and David flew down to Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park, the epicenter of the venture capital universe. They walked into the Andreessen Horowitz offices, a place that was legendary in the tech world. Nikolai, wearing a simple $150 black blazer and dark jeans, felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the big league. He didn't pitch them. He gave them a demo. He opened his laptop and showed them the live dashboard of Aura Trade. He showed them the real-time trades, the performance metrics, the risk analysis. He showed them the data from their beta clients, anonymized, but with the staggering returns clearly visible. He spoke for 20 minutes, his voice calm and confident. He answered their questions with precision and depth. He didn't sell a dream. He presented irrefutable results. The partners were silent for a moment after he finished. Then, Michael Chen leaned forward. "What you've built," he said slowly, "is one of the most impressive pieces of trading technology I have ever seen. How did you do this with only $500,000? "Focus," Nikolai said simply. The negotiations were swift. Andreessen Horowitz didn't want to just invest. They wanted to lead a massive Series A round that would give Aura Trade an insurmountable head start. They offered $20 million on a post-money valuation of $100 million. It was a stunning offer, a life-changing number. But Nikolai, remembering the lessons from his past, countered. He wasn't just looking for money, he was looking for the right valuation that would set them up for future growth. After a week of intense back and forth, they settled on the final terms. Andreessen Horowitz would lead a $40 million Series B round at a post-money valuation of $200 million. Nikolai's personal stake in the company, even after the dilution, was now worth over $120 million on paper. The deal closed on October 15th. The press release was slated to go out the next day, with an exclusive feature scheduled to air on CNBC's Tech Check at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. That night, Nikolai went back to his tiny studio apartment. He sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and looked out the window at the lights of the city. He had done it. In 6 months, he had gone from unemployed and broke to the CEO of a $200 million company. He felt a sense of quiet, profound satisfaction. It wasn't about the money. It was about the validation of his work, his vision, his resilience. He thought of Marisol for the first time in weeks. He wondered what she would think if she could see him now. He had no idea he was about to find out. Marisol was in her mother's living room in Tacoma. The house was small, a cramped 1,200-square-foot rambler that always smelled faintly of mothballs and regret. The television, a chunky 10-year-old Samsung, was tuned to CNBC. Her mother, a stern woman named Elena, insisted on watching the financial news all day, a habit Marisol found both irritating and grimly appropriate for her new, diminished circumstances. Marisol was folding laundry on the sofa, a pile of her mother's cheap polyester blouses. Her own expensive clothes hung in a cramped guest room closet, a museum of a life she no longer lived. The $185,000 she had taken, which had seemed like a king's ransom in March, was dwindling at an alarming rate. After paying off her credit card debt and covering her living expenses for 6 months, she was down to less than $90,000. The panic was a constant, low-grade hum beneath the surface of her days. She had been certain that her connections in the wealth management world would land her a better job, a more prestigious firm. But the market was tight, and her departure from her previous firm had been abrupt. The best she had managed to find was a junior advisor role at a small, local branch of Edward Jones, a significant step down in both pay and prestige. Her life had become a humiliating cycle of commuting from Tacoma to her depressing new job, then coming home to her mother's critical gaze. "You see that?" Elena said, pointing a remote at the screen. "That's what you should have married. A builder, not a manager." On the screen was the Tech Check segment. The anchor was talking enthusiastically about a new Seattle-based fintech startup that had just closed a massive funding round. "The company is called Aura Trade," the anchor said, "and it's taking the investment world by storm with its revolutionary AI-powered trading platform. Today, they announced a staggering $40 million Series B round, led by none other than Andreessen Horowitz, valuing the company at $200 million. Marisol froze, a half-folded blouse in her hands. The name Auratrade sounded vaguely familiar. A memory tickled at the edge of her mind, a whiteboard covered in equations. Nikolai trying to explain his little project. Her blood ran cold. The screen cut to a picture of the company's founder and CEO. It was Nikolai. He looked different, thinner with a beard, but it was unmistakably him. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt, standing in a sleek, modern office with a view of the Space Needle. He looked powerful. He looked confident. He looked like a man who had conquered the world. Marisol felt the air leave her lungs. Her hands started to tremble and she dropped the blouse. $200 million. The number was incomprehensible. It was a figure from another universe. She had left him because she thought his net worth had dropped to zero. She had traded a future billionaire for $185,000 and a room in her mother's house. The folly of her decision, the sheer catastrophic scale of her miscalculation, crashed down on her with the force of a physical blow. Her entire body went numb. The founder, Nikolai Vance, the anchor continued, a former Amazon product manager, built the platform in stealth mode for 18 months before launching just 6 months ago. It's one of the fastest growth trajectories we have ever seen. Vance? Her mother said, her voice sharp. Isn't that... Marisol didn't answer. She scrambled for her phone, her fingers fumbling with the screen. She pulled up Google and typed Nikolai Vance Auratrade. The search results flooded the screen. Forbes, TechCrunch, The Wall Street Journal. Every major financial news outlet had the story. It was real. She felt a wave of nausea. She had been standing on a winning lottery ticket and had thrown it in the trash because it was crumpled. She immediately tried to call him. The call didn't even ring. It went straight to a message. The number you have dialed has been disconnected. He had changed his number. Of course he had. She sent a frantic email to his old Gmail address. Nikolai, I just saw the news. Oh my God. I am so incredibly proud of you. I'm speechless. We need to talk. Please, call me. She hit send, her heart pounding in her chest. Minutes later, she received an automated reply. Thank you for your message. Nikolai Vance's personal email is no longer in use. For all business inquiries, please contact his executive assistant, Anya Sterling, at anyayauratrade.com. She immediately composed a new email to Anya Sterling. Dear Mrs. Sterling, my name is Marisol Reyes. I am Nikolai's wife. I need to speak with him urgently about a personal matter. Please have him call me at this number. She felt a small, desperate hope. Wife? The words still had legal weight. Their divorce wasn't final yet. An hour later, a reply appeared in her inbox. It was polite, professional, and utterly devastating. Dear Ms. Reyes, thank you for your email. Mr. Vance is currently in back-to-back meetings and is unavailable. He has instructed me to forward all personal matters to his attorney, Marcus Thorne. You or your legal counsel may reach him at his office. Sincerely, Anya Sterling, Executive Assistant to the CEO Auratrade. A wall. A professional, impenetrable wall. He wasn't just screening her calls. He had a system, an assistant, a high-powered lawyer, all acting as a firewall between his new world and her. The cold formality of Mr. Vance was a slap in the face. She was no longer Marie. She was Miss Reyes. A piece of correspondence to be routed through the proper channels. The desperation curdled into a frantic, pleading panic. She sent text after text to his old number, knowing they wouldn't go through but unable to stop herself. She left rambling, tearful voicemails on the General Auratrade office line, messages she knew would be deleted by someone like Anya. She was a ghost, haunting the edges of a life she had thrown away. The final, quiet strike came a week later, through her lawyer. Marcus Thorne had sent over a revised settlement offer. It was the same as before. She would keep the $185,000 and the furniture, and in exchange, all future claims would be waived. But there was a new addendum. Attached to the document was a press release about a new philanthropic initiative from Aura Trade. Nikolai was donating $1 million in personal stock to fund a scholarship at the University of Washington for underrepresented students in computer science. There was also a note about a gift to a former colleague. The filing detailed that one single share of Aura Trade common stock, valued at the Series B price of $250, had been gifted to an employee named David Chen. A quick calculation made Marisol feel sick. With the number of shares outstanding, that meant David's total equity grant was likely worth millions. He had given a junior engineer a life-changing fortune, a reward for his loyalty. The message was clear. Loyalty was rewarded. Betrayal was met with silence. Nikolai wasn't punishing her. He was simply erasing her from the equation. He was moving on, building a legacy, and she was not, and would never be, a part of it. The consequences of Marisol's decision cascaded through her life, each one a stark reminder of her monumental error. The first consequence was financial. The $185,000, which had felt like a fortress of security, was now a prison of mediocrity. It wasn't enough to buy a condo in the inflated Seattle-Tacoma housing market. Not without a significant mortgage she could no longer qualify for on her diminished salary. It was just enough money to make her feel trapped, a constant reminder of the hundreds of millions she had forfeited. Every time she paid for her $4.50 Starbucks coffee with her debit card, she couldn't help but think that if she had stayed, she could have bought the entire coffee shop. The second consequence was social. Her circle of friends, who had once admired her for her glamorous lifestyle and her successful husband, now viewed her with a mixture of pity and contempt. The news of Nikolai's success had spread through their network like wildfire. Whispers followed her at the few social events she still attended. "Did you hear about Marisol? She left him the day he got laid off, can you imagine?" She became a cautionary tale. The woman who fumbled the biggest bag in Seattle history. Her friend in HR at Amazon, the one who had given her the tip-off, stopped returning her calls. Associating with Marisol had become a social liability. The third consequence was familial. Her mother, Elena, never missed an opportunity to remind her of her mistake. "I always told you he was a good man, a smart man," she would say over their simple dinners of chicken and rice. "You were too focused on the shiny things. You never saw the real gold." The daily "I told you so" was a form of psychological torture. She was 38 years old, living in her childhood bedroom, being lectured by her mother about her life choices. It was a regression she had never imagined possible. The fourth and most profound consequence was internal. She was forced to confront the truth about her own character. She had always seen herself as a savvy, pragmatic operator. Now she saw herself as a greedy, short-sighted fool. Her entire value system, built on the worship of money and status, had been exposed as a hollow and self-destructive creed. She had made the most important decision of her life based on a single, flawed data point, Nikolai's temporary unemployment, and had ignored the most critical asset, his character and intellect. The shame was a constant companion, a heavy cloak she couldn't take off. She would lie awake at night in the too small bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying their last conversation over and over again. "Safer to be gone before tax season." The words mocked her, a testament to a risk assessment so catastrophically wrong it bordered on cosmic irony. Meanwhile, Nikolai's life was an ascending line on a graph. He moved out of the tiny studio and into a stunning $4 million penthouse in Madison Park with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. He didn't furnish it with expensive designer brands. Instead, he commissioned custom pieces from local artists and woodworkers, creating a space that was warm, personal, and understated. His 2012 Toyota Camry was replaced by a sleek, all-electric Lucid Air, a $90,000 car that was a marvel of engineering, not a status symbol. He hired a personal chef not for luxury, but for efficiency, to ensure he was eating healthy meals while working 80-hour weeks. His life was still defined by work, but now it was work born of passion and purpose, not the corporate grind. He was building something that would last, something that had value beyond a stock price. The contrast between their two realities was absolute. He was living the life she had always dreamed of, and she was living the life she had always feared. A year after the CNBC announcement, the divorce was finalized. Marisol had accepted the initial offer. Her lawyer had told her it was the best deal she would ever get. Fighting for more would mean going up against Marcus Thorne and the limitless resources of Nikolai Vance, a battle she was guaranteed to lose. She signed the papers in her lawyer's drab Tacoma office, her signature a final, pathetic surrender. She was officially single, with a net worth of what was left of the $185,000 and a future that felt bleak and empty. Nikolai, on the other hand, was thriving. Aura Trade had continued its meteoric rise. The company had launched its platform to a wider institutional market and was now managing over $1 billion in assets. The valuation had soared past the $500 million mark, and there was already talk of an IPO in the next few years. He was becoming a respected figure in the tech community, known for his quiet brilliance and his commitment to building a healthy, sustainable company culture. He found his peace not in the boardroom, but in the sprawling, windswept trails of Discovery Park. Most evenings, as the sun began to set over the Puget Sound, casting a golden light on the Olympic Mountains, he would go for a run. The rhythmic pounding of his feet on the dirt trails, the cool salt air in his lungs, the vastness of the sky and the sea, it all served to put his own life in perspective. The betrayal, the pain, the anger, it had all faded, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude and calm. The hardship had forged him into a stronger, more resilient version of himself. It had burned away the superficial and left only what was real and true. One cool evening in late autumn, he was finishing his run near the West Point Lighthouse. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Anya. UW Scholarship Committee just sent over the final list of recipients for the Vance Innovators Fund. 10 amazing students. The first generation of builders you're funding, thought you'd want to see. She had attached a PDF with the students' bios. He opened it and smiled. They were brilliant, hungry, and diverse, a reflection of the future he wanted to help build. He felt a sense of purpose that dwarfed any satisfaction he got from a rising stock price. This is what true wealth is. It is not the number in your bank account or the valuation of your company. It is not the expensive car or the penthouse apartment. Those are just byproducts, shadows on the wall. True wealth is the ability to create something of value from nothing. It's the resilience to withstand the storms of life and emerge stronger on the other side. It's the character to treat people with respect, to reward loyalty, and to build a legacy that helps others rise. Marisol had taken his money, but she could never take his real wealth. She had made a bet on his circumstances, while he had bet on his character. In the end, it was a lesson that had cost her everything and had given him the world. What we build within ourselves, our skills, our integrity, our resilience, is the only asset that no one can ever take away from us. It is the foundation of a truly rich life. Thank you for joining us on Love Beyond Pride. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own inner strength. We'll see you in the next story. At 36 years old, with an annual salary of $52,000 and hands permanently stained with the grease and paint of other people's repaired lives, Solomon sat on a chair that cost more than his first car. The chair, a sleek black leather piece that probably had a fancy Italian name, was situated in a glass-walled office on the 12th floor of a tower in downtown Charleston. It was the office of his divorce attorney, Daniel Hayes, a man whose suit was worth a month of Solomon's mortgage. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window, the sun glinted off the Cooper River, a picture of serene beauty that felt like a personal insult. Solomon's life was anything but serene. It was a wreck, a total loss, and he was the one who was supposed to know how to fix things that were broken. His wife, LaToya, had left him 6 weeks ago. She hadn't so much left as evaporated, taking with her the sense of normalcy he had mistaken for happiness. One day he came home from his job at North Charleston Collision, his back aching and the smell of primer clinging to his clothes, to a house that was emptier than usual. The silence was the first clue. Her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 gift from her father, was gone from the driveway of their Mount Pleasant home. Inside, the closets had been professionally emptied. A single envelope was left on the granite countertop in the kitchen, the same $15,000 countertop she'd insisted on. Inside was not a letter, but a business card for her lawyer, a man whose name was embossed in gold. That was LaToya's way. Efficient, cold, and expensive. The devastating situation wasn't just the end of his marriage. It was the chilling realization that for the past 6 years, he had been married to a stranger who had merely been tolerating his presence in her meticulously curated life. He was a line item she was now erasing. He just didn't know how deep the erasure went. Not yet. The early years had been a blur of aspiration, mostly hers. They met at a fundraiser, a world Solomon had stumbled into on a rare night out with a friend. He was in a rented tux that cost him $150, feeling like an imposter. She was luminous, a vision in a deep blue dress that probably cost 10 times his rent. Her skin was a radiant deep brown, and she moved with the unshakable confidence of someone who had never once had to check her bank balance before ordering dinner. She was the daughter of Dr. Richard and Mrs. Eleanor Vance, a name that carried weight in Charleston, synonymous with old money and sprawling properties in Mount Pleasant. Solomon was the son of a mechanic and a housekeeper, a lineage of honest work and calloused hands. LaToya had found his workaday life charming at first. She called him her real man, her solid ground. He'd believed her. He sold his small bachelor house in North Charleston for a modest $40,000 profit and poured every penny of it, his entire life's savings, into the down payment on their home in Mount Pleasant. It was a house she picked, of course, a $750,000 new build with white columns and a perfectly manicured lawn that a service tended to for $400 a month. He felt like he was living on a movie set. Their domestic life was a series of dollar-tagged tableaus. Sunday mornings were spent reading the paper in a living room furnished with a $12,000 sectional from Restoration Hardware, a piece of furniture so vast and white he was terrified to sit on it after a day at the shop. He'd come home, carefully taking off his $89 Red Wing boots on the back porch, and slip into the life she'd designed. He would cook because he was good at it, and it made him feel useful. He'd make the simple, hearty meals his mother taught him: gumbo, red rice, shrimp, and grits, in a kitchen equipped with a $9,000 Wolf gas range that LaToya had used exactly once to boil water for tea. "Oh, sweetie, it smells so rustic," she'd say, wrinkling her nose slightly as she walked in, wearing a $400 silk robe. She would pick at the food, pushing it around her plate while scrolling through her phone, her thumb flicking past images of lives even more glamorous than her own. He'd eat alone in spirit, the clink of his fork Against the 200 per setting china, the only sound he made. He tried to bring his world into hers. He bought a beautiful, sturdy oak table for the back patio, envisioning Sunday dinners like the ones he grew up with. His family wasn't large, just his 2 younger sisters, Pearl and Nadira, and their mother before she got sick. Those dinners were the bedrock of his childhood, loud, joyful affairs where love was measured in second helpings. He paid $800 for that table, a significant expense for him, and spent a whole weekend sanding and staining it himself. "It's perfect for when my sisters visit," he told LaToya, beaming with pride. She looked at the table from the doorway, a flute of $90 champagne in her hand. "It's very sturdy, honey. But do we really want to encourage them to just drop by? My parents are having a garden party next month. We can't have that thing cluttering up the view." The patio table was moved to a forgotten corner of the yard, where it gathered pollen and became a home for spiders, his family. That was the slow, grinding ache at the center of their marriage. In the beginning, he made excuses for them. "They're busy, Solly," LaToya would say, her voice smooth as butter. "Pearl is a teacher. Nadira has those 2 little ones. It's hard for them to get over the bridge." It was a 7-mile bridge, he'd call them, and the calls would go straight to voicemail. He'd leave messages filled with a growing, desperate cheerfulness. "Hey, Pearl, it's Solly, just calling to say hi. Hope everything's okay? Give me a call back when you get a chance," he'd text. "Nadira, saw your pictures on social media. The girls are getting so big. Let's get together soon." The blue bubble of his sent message would sit there, followed by the crushing stillness of no reply. Days, then weeks, would pass. LaToya would watch him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "See, I told you, they have their own lives. People grow apart, Solomon. It's natural. You have a new family now. Me, my parents." Her family was an impenetrable fortress of wealth and social obligation. Dinners at their compound, a $2.5 million estate on the waterfront, were stiff, formal affairs. Her father, Dr. Vance, would speak to Solomon with a kind of polite condescension, asking about the car business, as if Solomon were a curious but ultimately insignificant hobbyist. Her mother, Eleanor, would smile vaguely and talk about charity galas and European travel. They were a different species, and they treated him like a strange pet LaToya had brought home. He'd sit at their massive mahogany dining table, which could seat